Okay, so welcome, Kathy Newburn, to this Sydney Goodwill sharing of astrology at this time of great challenge and the great transition from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius. Over to you, Kathy.
Thanks, Wendy, and hello to all of you. It's really nice to be here with you, and let me share my screen. Okay. All right. Yeah, thanks so much. And sent me a transcript of the presentation she recently gave to the group. And honestly, she said everything in that presentation that I have to say, but it's always good in spiritual work and in most things to have repetition of ideas. And so this will be just a repetition, but everything changes, when we do it live. So as Wendy said, this little talk will be about some of the astrological factors underlying the present transition period. So this is an old etching that's been colorized, but it really demonstrates what the alchemists of old did, and it illustrates what we're attempting to do in our age, which is pierce through the veils. As you can see, the shepherd on the bottom left, piercing through the veils of this world of illusion, Maya and glamour, in which we're all encased and can't see anything really clearly. And if we think we can, that's probably even more of a sign that we can't. But if we work together in our meditation to build our inner bridge, our rainbow bridge, perhaps in moments of great opportunity, crisis, planetary alignments, perhaps we can pierce through those veils and see, as this astounded shepherd is seeing, into some of the cosmic worlds and the worlds that substand our outer world of seeming, piercing into the world of meaning. So astrology gives us perhaps some tools to aid us in that work. But as we know, astrology is based on illusion. Fundamentally, the sun is not in Aquarius right now. It's part of the illusion of our world. But the Tibetan also says that through the study of esoteric astrology and more through the pondering of it, we can have moments of illumination. And so perhaps that's its real value for us. Okay, so this is an auspicious time to be talking about astrology because, as you know, we're entering into the Aquarian age, and this being the first day of distribution of the energies of this full moon period, it's a good opportunity to come together and try and share a few thoughts. So, as you know, Aquarius is related to distribution. So on a day of distribution, the waters of life should be flowing freely. And I don't know about you, but here in this country, there have been some major events happened yesterday on the day of the full moon. Because if you looked at the horoscope of this event, I don't have it here, but the alignment in the full moon very much up with Pluto. As we know, Pluto just went into Aquarius, not for the final time, but for the second time. It first went in, I believe, in March of last year, and now it's going in again, and it will go in for its final run in mid-November of this year. And it will retrograde back into Capricorn starting in September and stay there for about 10 weeks or 8 weeks until mid-November. So this is the second ingress, as we call it, but it was interesting that the full moon lined up with the Pluto, Sun conjoined opposite moon in Leo. So it was true to form, as Plutonian energies are very intense. It was quite an intense day and in quite an intense full moon period. So perhaps, as I said last time, and as Dot repeated, I think there's an importance to this early degrees of Aquarius because of the really kind of a pre-dawn, because we haven't actually entered into the Aquarian age yet in some unpublished writings of the Tibetan in response to one of his students who was asked, is the date that you can give us for the start of the Aquarian age? The Tibetan said, yes, 2117. So we're not there yet. There's a 500-year transition period. We're not told exactly how that transition period works out, whether it's 500 years before 2117 and then the transition is over. For me, I more like to think of it as like a period of, what's it called in astrology when two signs are blending together? I forget the word, is the astrological term is evading me at the moment, but I think that really it's more likely that, say, 300 or 400 years transition during which the sun is mostly in Pisces, but moving more and more towards Aquarius. And then 2117, it enters into Aquarius. And then we have it's the cuspal period. Then the period of the full entry into the Aquarian age would kind of begin, but there would be a residue of Piscean energies and overlapping. So we're in that transition. And I think that it's kind of pushing the ante to say that we're in the Aquarian age right now. But surely that symbol of the solstice, the winter solstice, or the northern hemisphere solstice, or the whatever solstice you want to call it, I'm not sure how the PC term for people in Australia. I guess it's the December. That's what Dot told me. It's the December solstice in 2020, when there was an alignment exactly in 0 degrees of Aquarius between Jupiter and Saturn. That was really, to me, very significant, because the Tibetan says that there is a calendar date, there is a date in the year that is more important than Wesak. And for many years now, I've thought that must be the winter solstice. It could be Christmas Day, because despite the fact that, we don't have a global celebration of Christmas, there is such an incredible outpouring of spiritual energy at that time and there's an inner plane correspondence, as Flower Newhouse, if you haven't read what she's written about the energies on the inner planes that are alive during the 3 days leading up to Christmas Day, it makes me wonder that maybe Christmas Day is that day. But whatever, on the winter solstice is nonetheless an important day. And on that day, we had this tremendous alignment in Aquarius. And it really was, for those of you who study astrology, you'll know that that was the ingress, the final ingress of what they call an age of air. Not the Aquarian age, but this Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions occur every 200 years. They switch from an element. And we just ended 20 years ago the last round of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions in Earth signs. And now we're moving fully into the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions in air. And so as I said, every 200 years, there's a new element that is conditioning the period. And so it's quite auspicious, I would think, that this next 200-year period is also coinciding with our entry into an Aquarian, larger 2160-year cycle of air. So just to say that early degrees of Aquarius has been highlighted and was then highlighted again with Pluto going into Aquarius, and then this highlighted again in this world of Maya, glamour, and illusion, bringing it right down. We had the full moon in that lineup with the moon, sun, and Pluto aligning. So anyway, long-winded introduction. Okay. So I always think it's helpful to get a view of the planets because we have them in our head. We talk about them. Sorry, this image is very bad because it's small. I tried to make it bigger, but I couldn't. But it just helps us to see how tiny are the first four planets. But actually, there's another one, as we know esoterically, within the closer orbit between Mercury. If you can see my cursor, can you see the cursor? I don't know if anyone can answer me.
Yes.
Okay, you can see it. Okay, so here's Mercury. And we know that within the orb of Mercury, between Mercury and the sun, is Vulcan. So we actually have an even tinier planet in there. And then we have Mercury, Venus, Earth. Mercury and Venus and Earth are pretty much twin souls, same size, more or less. And then Mars. And then we have the giant Jupiter, giant Saturn, Neptune. Uranus, Uranus, Neptune, and little Pluto. So you can sort of see when you just look at it from this perspective, why little Pluto was demoted. Poor guy, all out there at the end of the solar system by his lonesome, surrounded by these big guys. But those of us who work with an understanding of astrology or some understanding, we know that Pluto is a planet. He is considered a planet by the Tibetan. So although he's been demoted by the astronomers, by the astrologers, he's not been demoted. So I think it's also helpful to say that these big guys, the four big guys, and the little Pluto, they all get most of the attention these days. Once they were discovered, prior to that time, prior to discovery of Uranus and Neptune and Pluto, we just had Saturn was the outskirts of our solar system, and Jupiter. These two planets have gotten attention, but the inner planets really haven't gotten as much attention over the last century because we've been so preoccupied with the big guys. Their orbits are much slower, so therefore their influence is with us for a long time. Whereas the smaller planets, as you know, they move so quickly. It's harder perhaps for us to grasp their energies, but I think that we should pay a lot of attention to them, which we're not going to do so today, but today, your day. But don't forget them and pay particular attention to the retrograde periods. We're so used to hearing about retrograde Mercury as being bad for electronics, signing contracts, and all those things. But I think that in an esoteric astrological perspective, they're very auspicious. So if we can get beyond thinking that whether we have an electronic breakdown at that time or if our plane is not on time as being calamitous, and kind of hold to an inner point of calm. Maybe there will be testing on the outer planes, but that's not an excuse for not trying to hold the inner tension so that we can appropriate the spiritual opportunity, because Mercury in particular and Venus in particular are very related to our planet. We know that those three form a triangle of supreme importance, not just for Earth itself, although for Earth it's extremely important, but for our solar system as well. So always hold those retrogrades. You can just get an ephemeris if you don't have one. Pay attention when they go retrograde, and particularly when they align exactly with the sun. That's a really big opportunity for Mercury for intuitive alignment. Mercury is a planet of intuition, but Venus is our higher self, our soul. And when it aligns with the heart of the sun, meaning when it's in the exact degree of the sun, it brings with it a tremendous influx of the energy of the presence. At LifeBridge, we work with a meditation called, what's it called? Something of the presence.
Technique.
Technique of the presence. So in a way, when we participate in the Venus, Sun, Earth alignment, it's as if the angel, which is embodied in Venus, Venus is like the solar angel, and the sun in this instance becomes the present. So the angel is usurped in a way, enters into the heart of the sun, and the energy of the presence comes through. So just to say, let's pay attention to the whole period, the 40-day period of the Venus retrograde, but let's pay attention particularly to the day and the time of the exact alignment. That's a really powerful spiritual practice, which I'm sure in the future people will pay more attention to. A lot of the astrological community is paying attention to it, but I don't know if a lot of them are paying attention to it in a spiritual sense, but they're paying attention. That's a step. So get back on track. Okay. I was given 4 main points by my boss, Miss Dot. So, all right. So why this is a challenging period, because we know that it is from looking at the outer world. One of the things that I think is important is a number of the planets going through the last degrees of a sign of the zodiac. And that's happening over the next period of time, next year and a half, the next year, is Jupiter going through the last degrees of Taurus, Saturn going through the last degrees of Neptune, of Pisces, Uranus going through the last degrees of Taurus, Neptune going through the last degrees of Pisces. And then we have one more retrograde back of Pluto going through the last degrees of Capricorn. Now it's progressed into Aquarius, but it still has one more round of Capricornian energies to pass through. So this is an ancient idea. It's called the Egyptian bound system of dividing each sign into 3 sections. I'm not sure, they're not the same as the decanates, but there might be some overlap there. I'm not sure. But in the system of the Egyptian bounds, each of the last 10-degree segment of the sign is in a malefic influence. And they thought of Saturn as malefic and Mars. So it was either in one of those signs. And so their observation, they didn't just place things on hearsay. They did a lot of correlation over many centuries between outer events and the planets. And so they brought down this idea that they noticed when the planets went through the last degrees of a sign that challenges occurred. And we can see this happening, as we know there are many other factors, such as the Shambhala energies pouring in, the ending as we reach 2025, preparing for another Shambhala impact, but also the ending of the stage of the Forerunner, the 60-year stage of the Forerunner that began in 1965 and now will be culminating in 2025. This is the period when the Tibetan says that, we're sort of like the St. John the Baptist, the new group of world servers. We hold that opportunity to stand as the new group, as a forerunner for the Christ, preparing the way. And he said that during the last period of this time now that we're in, the hierarchy will gather in conclave in 2025 and decide how humanity has done during this stage of the Forerunner. Have we sufficiently prepared the way, prepared human consciousness for the externalization to begin? I don't think we're just judged by outer events. If we were, we'd probably say, well, we're a failure. But always at the ending of an age, always there's a withering of the law and an uprising of lawlessness on all sides. And then the teacher comes to reestablish spiritual law. And so if we look at humanity as a whole, if we look at the consciousness existing within the new group of world servers, we can see that great strides have been taken. And the outer chaos is a sign, we could say, a sign that the forces of materialism are doing all they can to prevent the externalization and to arrest the possibility of Christ's return, because they know this is their last gasp on this planet. Think about that. They're very smart, very smart. And that's why I started by saying, if we think we know, we probably don't, because we can't underestimate the power of the forces of materialism. And we're living in a time of the Antichrist. And so we can expect, I personally don't believe in one Antichrist, but I don't know. I'm not a Christian scholar, so I don't know. But it seems to me that could be multiple envisionings of Antichrists. And these people look very good from one perspective. So and the people who might be more to be the new group of world servers might look not so good. So we have to always learn to not judge by appearances and to reserve judgment and to just know that we're living in a time when black is white and white is black. It's a very Uranian cycle. The orbit of Uranus is different than all of the other planets. As we enter into the Aquarian age, as the seventh ray comes in, as we're passing through this final time of Uranus, fall position. Uranus is in fall in Taurus. It's a time when things are not the way they seem. So we have to get our vision be with one of detachment as a soul, be observers, be divine observers, not attached to the outer happenings, Because if we get too attached to them, to our own party or our own presidential figure or prime minister, whatever, then we get pulled into the pairs of opposites. And the new group of world servers doesn't really belong to any party. They don't get pulled into the extremes, and they stand in the center. And knowing that whatever happens, that's part of the plan working out. And it's a hard thing to work with, but that's where I'm trying to come from these days. So talking about some more astrological events, we're coming up to the weekend before the Wesak festival, which is early this year. So on the 20th and 21st of April, we'll be having an exact alignment between Uranus in Taurus and Jupiter in Taurus. As we know, Taurus is the sign governing the new group of world servers. So what better opportunity during the Taurus full moon, right before the Taurus full moon period? Wow, that is a powerful alignment of the two planets that govern the whole Aquarian age. Uranus being the exoteric ruler of Aquarius, and Jupiter being the esoteric ruler, the second ray planet, sacred planet, the seventh ray sacred planet, aligning in the sign of the new group of world servers, leading up to the Taurus full moon. Taurus being the sign of the Buddha himself, the messenger from the East. Wow, powerful opportunity for us to work as members of the new group of world servers to help the Christ and to help the Buddha. I believe he's moved on, and therefore the new group of world servers is kind of like helping the world teacher, helping the hierarchy to channel those energies that are now, perhaps, this is a hypothesis, coming direct from the planetary logos, from Sanat Kumara, through the valley, straight into the hierarchical energies back to Christ, and then distributed more directly to the new group of world servers. And as the Tibetan tells us, in each land, in each nation, there will be a representative among humanity to receive these energies. And at the Taurus full moon, that representative is working on the first straight line. And then at the Gemini, the concluding of the three spiritual festivals, the representative will be a initiate in each land. And so we can hold that in mind, and it portends a powerful impact for sure on the inner planes. We never know how long it takes for things to work out on the outer planes, but on the inner planes, there's definitely some strong energies. Because the Tibetan does highlight that the Jupiter-Uranus alignment is related to the fifth degree. And we know that the Taurus full moon is a time of initiation. So who knows if on the inner planes, it could make sense that prior to the conclave in 2025, perhaps there could be a shift of many, or not many, but a number of the arhats, the fourth degree initiates, moving forward, take in preparation for that conclave. And of course, we don't know, but nonetheless, all of us in our serried ranks can participate in a great moving forward, because as we know, when any disciple, when any initiate moves forward, the disciples are also, if they can stand the vibration, moved, given an opportunity to take a step forward as well on our level of consciousness. So that's a big event coming up. and to just talk a little about Pluto entering into a new sign. As you know, it has a varied cycle, but this cycle is 20 years. It's always a long cycle. It's the slowest cycle. It's the most outer planet, so it takes longer to move around the sun. So just to highlight a few points, as we saw when Pluto went through Capricorn, it was the extremes that were highlighted. One extreme is the deepest of materialism. There was a great amassing of wealth in the hands of fewer and fewer individuals. And now, on the other side, Capricorn is the most material, but it's also the most spiritual. And so the heights, I'm sure that within the hierarchy itself, there was great movement. And among the new group of world servers who have our festival week related to the sign of Capricorn, surely the whole group has been powerfully stimulated during this, particularly this 2019 festival week, which occurred when 6 planets over the course of the week were found in the sign of Capricorn. Then in 2020, January, we had a huge alignment of outer planets with the sun and moon in Capricorn. So there's been a big opportunities for spiritual advancement. So we saw the depths of materialism and heights of spirituality. Aquarius, on the other hand, each sign has its own qualities, as you know. Aquarius is really a sign of humanity. It's a sign of the people. It's a sign of group consciousness. So it's also very much related to movements within the new group of world servers who are given a greater opportunity to work as groups, as a group disciple. So Aquarius is a sign of the people, which means it's a sign of decentralization. And so the last time when Pluto went into Aquarius, we saw that the French Revolution occurred, the tail end of the American Revolution, but really the writing of the Constitution, that's a very Pluto in Aquarius doctrine. When the principles that our republic in the United States was founded upon were given concretization during the time when Pluto was in Aquarius. And so the United States Constitution, along with its Declaration of Independence, which was the earlier 1776, really lays out a blueprint for the Aquarian age. Nothing ever like it was seen before. It really put the people, intended to make the people the governing body. We no longer were ruled by a monarchy, and we were supposed to not be ruled by a centralized banking system. That was the initial idea for this country. These were radical movements. It was a very radical group of people. But then, unfortunately, there was the institution of a centralized banking system that was tried to be appropriated for this country numerous times, then was finally pushed through. And I forget the word, can't say it, way in the early part of the 20th century. So we're stuck with that for now. But I do believe with this push into a new Aquarian dispensation that this will be changed, because it's a central problem to the whole global economic system. We need to get away from the centralized control of the Federal Reserve in this country, which is not a government agency, as many of you probably know. It is an agency that is controlled by the big bankers, which is just what our founding fathers wanted to get away from. But in fact, it didn't happen, and it's become a global problem. So I do believe that over the course of this next 20-year period, that we will have a return to true Aquarian values. Of course, not fully. That will only happen as the whole age unfolds. But I think this is a time when Saturn is going to be very strong. The Tibetan tells us the first decade of the Aquarian age, which lasts for 700 years, will be ruled by the planet Saturn. We're not going to be fooling around anymore. We're going to have laws. Hopefully, will be based on sound spiritual principles that can help to cement the Aquarian values and to take them away from the hands of the materialists, placing them in the hands of humanity. And that's what I think Pluto in Aquarius can mean, a time of decentralization, of power, you know, kind of what the United States was supposed to be, but really is no longer. This decentralization, though, it's tricky because, as I said earlier, we are living in the time of false prophets. We're living in a time of fake news on all sides. With the institution of AI, we can make anybody look like they're saying anything. And if you haven't seen examples of this, check it out. I saw a man speaking Spanish, lips moving, and it was the man introducing it himself. He says, I speak no Spanish. But using technology, you can just make someone's lips move. You can make anyone say anything. So it's going to behoove all of us to be very discriminating and very wary of anything that's said by anybody, unless maybe you see them in the room, you know, where you're standing. There's a lot of manipulation that can go on. So decentralization, people are saying, oh, wow, we can have digitalized currencies. We don't need to go to our banks, you know, we can have one digital ID that'll open all doors for us. Beware of that type of decentralization, things that look really easy and are like wolves in sheep clothing. But the true decentralization will be such that the people will be able to have fair and free elections, will be able to make their voices heard. This is the hope. But we know that in the French Revolution, the last time this occurred, this passageway, there were a lot of, it looked like everything was for the people. But unfortunately, towards the end of that period, Napoleon, who was a Leo, you know, the Sun King, tried to usurp and did usurp the power and centralized it in himself, perhaps professing to be the man of the people, but in effect, he lost it. And he said on his deathbed that if he had held to the ideals of the George Washington in the United States, who gave up power for 2 terms in office, didn't want it. People wanted him to stay as the king. And he said, no, we had our revolution to do away with the king. We don't want the king. And Napoleon on his deathbed said, if I had followed that model, we would have had a very different revolution here. So although a revolution could look good, and there's a lot of revolutionary fervor in the world at this time, we already see it in the uprising of the farmers first in Denmark, no, in Holland, now in Germany, in Canada. There's all kinds of movements because there's a lot of centralization of the farms and the farmers, supposedly being said, well, we want to get rid of all the meat industry. Well, we have to think of what we're doing, you know? We have to think about the consolidation. Who's consolidating all these farms? It's not the people, it's the centralized powers. Who's buying up all the farmland in the United States? Bill Gates, and the other big bankers. So really we have to look at what's going on from a more open-eyed perspective and not go for every type of decentralization that comes before us. And every revolutionary movement, all revolutions, as the French Revolution taught us, are subject to a lot of corruption. People can get blinded with revolutionary fervor. And hopefully the revolutions that will be coming in the Aquarian age can be more mentally polarized, less astral. But if people are pushed beyond their limits, sometimes it seems as if revolution on the physical planes becomes a necessity. But let's hope that we can have more mental revolutionary movements through laws and legislation, through the ballot boxes of the world, through fair and free elections everywhere. Let's hope. That's the other thing. You have to look out for computerized voting systems because they're so easily manipulated. And I was in England once when they had an election for prime minister, and I thought it was really cool to see young people counting the ballots by hand, you know. Although it seems like we should be able to institute a free and fair election using the electronic media, and I hope we can. But until then, I think we should have ballot boxes of paper ballots, you know, that gives the people a chance to vote. That's what we need. So Pluto going through Aquarius is going to be, if it works out on its higher spiritual potential, a time of strengthening of the power to the people. And we can see that the people are beginning to demand that. But the people don't have the power yet. But let's see what happens over this next 20-year cycle. We don't know, but it's certainly promising. And then on my list, what do I have next? Major conjunctions. Okay. So we mentioned the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. We also have upcoming in 2026, we have an exact alignment between Neptune and Saturn. So during this period now that we're moving through, between that now and then, which is a short period of time, both Saturn and Neptune are going through the final degrees of Pisces. So in a way, this is really symbolic of this time of endings, you know. We know that we're going through a time of ending of the long Piscean age, which is this 2160-year cycle. We're going through the end of that age in alignment with this ending of a Piscean cycle between Neptune and Saturn, who are coming together and then aligning for the first time exactly in 2026 in the sign of Aries. So Aries, as you know, is the sign of new beginnings, new growth, fresh spring energy coming in. And Pisces is a sign of death and the endings of cycles. It's a great sign of spiritual depth. So let's not only look forward to the beauty of those planets entering together into Aries, but let's also really soak in and breathe deeply during this next 2-year period, wherein the ending of a long cycle of these two planets transiting through Pisces is upon us. And then there's another ending period that I don't know if I made it up or I intuited it, but it also coincides with our going through a Pisces cycle. It's maybe a little complicated, but not really. But if you look at 2025, just describe it very quickly. We know that the 25th year of each century begins the period of the higher interlude, really, for the century. I divide the century into 4 quarters. 0, the year 2000 to 2025, is the in-breath. Then in 2025, it's the Aries point. It's the beginning of a whole new 100-year cycle. So we're in the in-breath now. We're at the final stage of the in-breath. We're moving towards the Aries point. So therefore, we're in Pisces now, in the end of the in-breath. We're breathing in, we're making a vertical alignment, and we're breathing in the energies of Pisces, just coincidentally, aligning with, as I said, Neptune and Saturn aligning in that sign. And then in 2025, we enter into an Aries period, and it's just the tail end. I believe that Neptune dips into to Aries at that year, but their exact alignment doesn't occur until 2026 in the summer of that year. So it's a powerful, powerful time now of endings, of inbreathing, of, I guess you could call it like right before we enter into the full moon period. You know, we're inbreathing, but we're just on the periphery of the full moon. So that's what we're in a powerful period now. So we shouldn't just look forward. We should always be being grateful for the time that we're in right now. So then when these two planets of Saturn and Neptune align in Aries, it's such a powerful planetary signature of new beginnings. So I can't help but think that it's very auspicious for the conclave and very auspicious for the festival week in 2026, December 2026, when there's a full moon. And the Tibetan says whenever there's a full moon during the festival week, it's extremely auspicious. The already overshadowing Capricorn energies, which the Tibetan says there's this huge extra zodiacal constellation that overshadows the very large Capricorn constellation. That overshadowing, the correspondence between that overshadowing extrazodiacal constellation and Capricorn constellation is the same, or is of the same magnitude as the whole constellation of Capricorn overshadowing our little planet. So if you can just use your imagination as to how vast that extrazodiacal constellation that's overshadowing these events of the festival week is, wow, is that a strong energy pouring in? And he said that when the full moon occurs during that week, the energies are magnified tremendously. So we're preparing for that event already, you know. The new group of world servers is really bridging already and bringing through Capricorn, the energies from the age of Capricorn, just as the final days of Christ in the upper chamber was a whole Aquarian ceremony. The Christ was initiating his group into the Aquarian energies then, because we're forerunners. So we're that group, we're that discipleship group now, much larger than the Christ's small group 2,000 years ago. We're already being prepared for the next age, the age of Capricorn, the age of initiation. We're already stretching towards that. And so this alignment between Saturn and Neptune is always a time of concretizing the energies of Neptune. Neptune esoterically is understood as the Christ. Michael Robbins always said that, you know, that Neptune is the Christ. It's the archetypal Christ energy. And Saturn is the grounding energy. So what a beautiful symbol of the grounding of the Christ energy at a time when the hierarchy is deciding on the timing of the reappearance. You know, who knows? I mean, this could really open the floodgates to the reappearance and to the externalization. We shouldn't discount that. If you look around the world at this time, I mean, what's going on in so many sectors, I personally probably don't think that's going to happen, but he does say that the floodgates of the externalization could be sooner or later, depending upon the actions of the new group of world servers. So we just don't know. We don't know. Because the new group is composed of many people who are behind the scenes. It's not just people we see. We might tend to think that way. But there's many young people. There's many people who are very advanced, who are working behind the scenes, we don't know how to judge the preparedness, the work the new group has done from outer perspectives. And so let's cultivate Shraddha, faith, strength, the faith of things that aren't seen and of things that are hoped for. Let's cultivate that and know that there are many forces that we just don't know about and that are working out behind the scenes. So, and then at that time, when the alignment occurs between Neptune and Saturn, there is, oops, I forgot to show Pluto before. All right. There is this alignment in the sky during July of that summer after, before the conclave. This is in Cancer, before the Capricorn conclave, where the outer planets are making what a French astrologer who was very good at predictions, he said that this alignment was extremely auspicious. And we can see that it is, because we have 5 outer planets all within a close orb. Pluto's Saturn's a little bit advanced in degree, it's 14 degrees, but all the others are 4, 4, 4, and Jupiter in 2 degrees of making sextiles and opposition and trines to one another. This is a beautiful alignment. This French astrologer who's now deceased, André Barbeau, he predicted that this was the key signature of the whole period to come. I do believe he described it as a signature of the Aquarian age, but I don't want to misquote him. He might have just said of the century, but he definitely said it was the most important alignment of the whole century. But whether he characterized it just for our century, but I think he characterized it more as an Aquarian symbol. And he related it to a change, a shift in the consciousness of nations, a coming together of the nations of the world to provide for the poor. Because as we know now, the situation in the industrialized countries is such that the masses of humanity from the South, primarily, are streaming in. And this is causing many disruptions and many challenges for the industrialized world. So it makes sense to me that there might be some rapid shifts once this Aquarian Plutonian energy comes in, to move towards ways to equilibrate the global economy so that the people of the world, instead of being suffering in the hands of war by the globalists, will find that a new true globalism can bring a redistribution of the money energy of the world, and really meaning of the goods and resources of the world, so that all the peoples of the world can benefit. So I think that's really the everything that I needed to say according to my master dot. So I'm sure it was long-winded, but oh yeah, a little bit longer than I expected. But so let's I'll stop my share and we can go back into another type of sharing.
Okay. So thank you, Kathy. That was brilliant. And it's just kind of lots of ideas are popping. So Doc, can we stop the recording now? And